ComancheIndians.com. I'm Evan Renton. This is the Countdown to Two-A-Days series. Our daily look at an area football team, the key questions we're going to be answering about that team, and our August 21st preseason preview here at Big Country Preps. I'm with my partner, Dan Youngblood, via Zoom. And tonight, Dan, we've got the Comanche Indians.
And this is a Comanche program that under Coach Jake Escobar has really taken some nice strides the last several years. I think this year is going to be one that kind of tests the program he's built there. They've got a solid group back with 20 of their 39 lettermen returning, but only 4 offensive and 5 defensive starters. So they're going to have a lot of spots to fill with new players. One big positive is a lot of those may be filled by kids from a 9-1 JV team. So they've got some really good young talent coming up, but still, anytime you're filling that many replacing that many starters, that's a challenge. So obviously they're going to have some questions to answer if they hope to get back to the playoffs this year, and we'll talk about some of those here in a little bit. But I'm excited about this season for Comanche. I think it's going to be a fun one to watch.
Going to be interesting, especially in that new district. All right, before we get going, we want to remind you YouTubers to please hit the subscribe button. After that, hit that little bell so you'll get notifications each and every time that Big Country Preps comes up with a new video. Also, we'd like to thank a couple of our sponsors, beginning with For the Love of the Game Broadcasting and our old friend Terry Slavens, owner of KLAX 93.5 FM out of Brackenridge, 97.7 FM KATX out of Eastland, Classic Country AM 1330 out of Graham, 94.7 FM KWKQ out of Graham, KROO 1430 AM out of Breck, and KWBY 98.5 FM out of Ranger. That is For the Love of the Game Broadcasting. Also, Rob Durham, sales consultant at Bear Chevrolet Buick Cadillac up in Breckenridge. If you're in the market for a vehicle, give Rob a shot at 254-559-2266. He's one of the nicest guys you'll ever want to meet. That is Rob Durham up at Bear Chevrolet Buick Cadillac in Breckenridge.
All right, and with that, let's go ahead and jump in. Let's talk about the Comanche Indians and some of the biggest questions that will be facing them in the 2024 season. And I'll just start in that offensive backfield where they've lost a couple of guys who have been, significant contributors for them the last couple of years. Layden Welch at the quarterback position has graduated. Sawyer Wilkerson at the running back position has transferred to Stephenville. Those are 2 guys that have been just, almost near constant sources of production for them the last few years. And those are going to be tough holes to fill. The one good thing is Colt Schwartner got a ton of experience last year as a sophomore and ran for over 1,000 yards. So he's a kid that clearly can do the job, and he'll probably be leaned on more heavily this year even than he was last year. The quarterback position is going to be one that I think is going to be fun to watch. They've got a guy they're excited about in Caden Davis, who's a really good athlete, and it looks like he may be taking that spot over. But anytime you're replacing a guy like Layden Welch, who was a multi-year starter and just a really steady hand back there, you kind of never know how it's going to go. So I'm excited to see how that plays out.
All right. Well, the one big question that I've got for Comanche this year will be on how much help they're going to get from that 9-1 JV team. They've got 20 returning lettermen back, but they're losing 19 players off of last year's team. I believe 18 of them were seniors, and that's including a lot of talent. Then you have a move away, in Wilkerson. So how much help are they going to get from that JV bunch? And that's a 9-1 JV team. So they got an influx of good young talent coming up again over in Comanche. So if they don't hit all cylinders this year, they'll be hitting them all, hitting all cylinders again next year. But can they do it this year? We shall see. It's going to be a tough district, but if they get sufficient help from that JV team, they might surprise. And I think that's going to be the big key for at least for this season.
And the last question we'll discuss here on today's episode, for me, is the O-line, the offensive line. They've got some pretty significant size, but a lot of guys who haven't necessarily played a ton of varsity snaps on that side of the ball. So I think that's going to be an interesting question because we've talked about, the quarterback position, that the running back position, but those guys are going to need some guys to block for them and create holes for those guys to do what they do. So I think that's going to be a big key to Comanche's success this year, as it is for any team. But when you've got some question marks as they do, I think it's that's going to be one to watch. Just see if these guys that are taking over or playing bigger roles this year are capable of really paving the way for what has been one of the more physical running games in the past several years. So that's what Coach Escobar likes to do. I'm just interested to see if this group can kind of keep them rolling that direction, allow them to do what they want to do offensively.
All right, and with that, we're going to take a quick look at Comanche's schedule for 2024. We'll start with the non-district portion first, and it's going to be a challenging non-district portion. They will open with Poth. It's Poth, isn't it?
Yeah, Poth.
Sorry, my apologies, people. I'm from Arizona. Poth, and that'll be on August the 29th at the Alamo Dome in San Antonio. So that'll be sweet. Then they've got Llano on September the 6th. That's going to be a home date. They're going to be on the road 2 weeks in a row after that, on the 13th of September at Eastland, a week later at Toller with a very difficult road game there. And then they'll return home to face earlier in their final district, non-district game. That'll be on September the 27th. After that, a much needed off day before they jump into district.
Yeah, and it seems like this has been a trend talking about the teams in this district that to a T. I mean, to all of them seem to really load up that non-district schedule. So a tough non-district schedule leading into what's going to be a tough district schedule. They open right off the bat October 11th with a home game against Jim Ned before hosting Sweetwater on the 18th of October. So two big games right off the bat in district play before going on the road to play Breckenridge on October 25th. They host San Angelo TLCA on November 1st before wrapping up their district schedule at Clyde on November 8th. So we've talked a lot the last couple of nights about this district, how much fun it's going to be, how difficult it's going to be for every team in it. And that's one of the things I think is really intriguing is you've got, at a minimum of 5 teams that expect to make the playoffs, only 4 of which can. And I think it could really finish in any order. So I'm really excited about this district race.
I fully expect the district champion to have at least one loss here in
Mhm.
this league. The district titleist will have a loss. I don't think
Yeah.
anybody's going to sweep through this league.
I tend to agree. And just looking at that in district schedule, what do you see as being the game of the year for the Comanche Indians?
Depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about just getting into the playoffs, assuming that they're going to be clear-cut favorites over TLCA, a win at Breckenridge gets you in my opinion. And that's not to say that Comanche's not capable of knocking off Jim Ned, Sweetwater, or Clyde. That can happen. Um, but just to get into the playoffs, I think that Breckenridge game is going to be very important. That's two very young, talented teams. Breckenridge is much in the same situation as Comanche with a bunch of juniors and sophomores coming up. Not a lot of experience, but a whole bunch of potential for the future. And they're going to be locking horns there on October 25th. I think that's going to be a fun game at Breckenridge right there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's for their playoff hopes. I think that's probably the biggest game on their schedule. But I'm excited about those first 2 against Jim Ned and Sweetwater, just to see. I mean, those are kind of those. If you want to compete for a district championship, those are those kind of measuring tape games. So if they can be competitive in those 2, I think it bodes well for them. If you lose those 2, you kind of go into that Breckenridge game at 0-2, and if you lose, and then you start to maybe your confidence can start to wane a little bit. But I'm excited to see how this plays out because I really do think this is going to be one of the more fun districts to follow of all of those that we cover this year.
Comanche does have one intangible here we haven't really mentioned. They've got, teams, they've got a lot of turf teams in their district, and Comanche still plays on grass. And most of these teams like Ned and Sweetwater, they don't play on grass very often, and Jim Ned and Sweetwater have to go out to Comanche this year and play on that grass. So that'll be interesting to see how they adapt to that.
Yeah, and I think Comanche's physicality can be an issue for some of these teams as well. So it's going to be a fun. I mean, I'm going to really be excited to follow this district this year. I think it could be a wild one.
All right, and with that, it's about time to wrap up this edition of the Countdown to Two-A-Days series, the Comanche Indians. But before we do that, we want to remind you, August 21st is the big day here at Big Country Preps. That's the day we release our annual preseason football preview. It's the most comprehensive look at Big Country High School athletics that you're going to find in any media source in the area. Not only do we cover every 11-man football team in the Big Country, but a few on a sprinkling of them out on the outside of the Big Country as well, plus 6-man football. We'll have previews for all those ball clubs, the 11-man teams. We'll have a look at 6-man football. We'll have features, player features, a ton of them. We'll have opinion pieces, predictions, stats, standings, a whole bunch of pictures, lots of videos. You name it, we're going to have it here. And plus the most accurate set of predictions of any media source on Big Country football as well.
And this year, our preview will be growing as we are adding 5 new teams to the coverage area. Those were Mineral Wells, Glen Rose, Graham, Toller, and Miles. So we're super excited to be adding those 5 to the mix. We hope y'all are excited to follow our coverage of those schools throughout the school year. In the meantime, thank you for joining us for this episode of our Countdown to Two-A-Days series. And make sure you come back tomorrow and we talk about the Jim Ned Indians here at BigCountryPreps.com.